Collective ministerial responsibility. As we know that the Prime Minister selects a number of cabinet ministers from the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Once selected as cabinet ministers, each minister is given a position as the head of one of the government departments. Cabinet ministers respond to oral questions from the MPs. The cabinet members, along with the Prime Minister, schedule weekly closed-door sessions to discuss the collective stance of the cabinet to avoid inconsistent responses from the cabinet ministers. The solidarity of the cabinet is consistently challenged by the opposition in an attempt to create contradictions between cabinet ministers. The idea is to scrutinize the work of the cabinet in the political realm using the parliamentary platform. It is therefore imperative for the cabinet members to have their responses in line with the rest of the cabinet members. This effort results in the cabinet collective responsibility. We can loosely define the cabinet collective responsibility as a constitutional convention that members of the cabinet must publicly support all governmental decisions made in cabinet, even if they do not privately agree with them. This support includes voting for the governmental bills in the legislature. The purpose of this support is to have a strong front by the government, so the government can withstand the political and public pressure. This collective responsibility puts a few constraints on the members of the cabinet. So if a member of the cabinet wants to openly object to a cabinet decision, then they are obliged to resign from their position in the cabinet. The result is that if a vote of no confidence is passed in the parliament, the government is responsible collectively, and thus the entire government resigns. The consequence will be that a new government will be formed, or parliament will dissolve, and a general election will be called. Cabinet collective responsibility is not the same as individual ministerial responsibility, which states that the ministers are responsible and therefore culpable for running of their departments. Unlike a presidential system used in the United States, a parliamentary system's executive and legislative branches are intertwined, as we have seen in our discussion of separation of power. In non-parliamentary governments like that of the United States, cabinet collective responsibility is not formally practiced. This is due to the clear separation of the executive and the legislature in policy making. The United States President's cabinet members cannot simultaneously serve in Congress and the government, and therefore cannot vote on the legislation supported by the executive. The President instead has veto power over legislations passed by Congress to keep a check on the powers of the Congress. In the US, cabinet unity and collective agreement between members is important to cabinet stability and party politics, but cabinet members do not have to publicly support legislation proposed by the President. It is, however, in the cabinet members' best interest to support and align with the President's policies because they serve at the pleasure of the President, who can at any time dismiss them. Cabinet collective responsibility consists of two main features. The first feature is cabinet confidentiality. It means that the members of the cabinet must not reveal the content of the discussion which takes place in the cabinet. This allows for cabinet members to privately debate and raise concerns without any political fear or pressure. The second feature is cabinet solidarity, which basically means that the members of the cabinet must publicly show a unified position and must vote with the government even if they privately disagree with the decision that has been made. This feature can be compared with the court's judgments, where the majority judgment becomes the law, even though some judges might dissent with the decision. The only difference being that the court's dissent is public, while the cabinet's dissent is not public. In the United Kingdom, the doctrine of collective responsibility applies to all members of the government, from the members of the cabinet down to parliamentary private secretaries. Its inner workings are set out in Ministerial Code. On occasion, this principle has been suspended, most notably when Prime Minister Harold Wilson allowed cabinet members to campaign both for and against the 1975 referendum on whether the UK should remain in the European Economic Community. In 2003, Tony Blair allowed Claire Short to stay in the cabinet despite her public opposition to the 2003 Iraq War. However, she later resigned. In a recent example, the convention appeared to have been partially suspended under the coalition government of Prime Minister David Cameron, with Liberal Democrat ministers such as Vince Cable frequently publicly criticizing the actions of Conservative cabinet members. Do you think the convention can work in a coalition government where not all members of the cabinet are from the same political party and have differences in policy?